Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Our first story about the beautiful military spouse who got justice through a congressman. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. And our first story. You want me to call my congressman? Okay. So my husband is a veteran, 100% disabled, so all of his care is through the VA. I would like to point out that we are very happy with his care currently and that he's getting excellent care now. But that was not always the case. My husband had an aneurysm, abdominal aortic aneurysm to be exact, and the VA was going to fix it because it was large and had a 25% chance of breaking on any given day, which would mean I would lose my husband. So I was very invested in making sure this took place. We live in Middle America, so the hospital where they're doing the procedure is 200 miles away. We have to stay there while he's in the hospital, so we decided to send my son to my mom's in order to keep him out of the area while Dad is recouping. While we are at the airport sending my son off, we get a call from the hospital that the surgery is canceled because of a broken machine. We head back to the hospital and I asked the nurse when we could expect to be rescheduled. She said it could be a couple of months. I explained, I was actually nice about it, that we needed to have it done before a couple of months, and was there no other VA facility in the area that could do the surgery? And this is what I was told. If you people would talk to your congressman about funding, you people wouldn't have to deal with these things, but because you people think we owe you, you people need to get a grip. If you have a problem, call your congressman. So being a good Army spouse, I did. We walked out of the hospital and I called them directly. Told them what was going on. They called the head of the VA for the district, who called the head of the VA hospital we were at, who called the nurse, who got fired. He had the surgery a week later at a well-known medical center, not VA, and all was well. Afterwards, the head of the VA called to ask me why I couldn't have handled this in-house. I explained that I was a good military wife and did what I was told to by someone higher up. And our second story. CEO voids verbal agreement. Enjoy the new union. 25 years ago, I worked 7 nights a week as a driver, subcontracted to the local newspaper to deliver bundles to stores and carriers. At 18, I was the youngest driver with his own route, having first been brought in by a family friend when I was 16 as a spare driver, then moving up. My days were at college studying comp sci or working computer repair jobs. Verbal agreement gets voided. The rural route I was offered had the greatest number of kilometers with a relatively low number of newspapers compared to the other routes. I made an agreement with the manager, bought a heavy-duty cargo van, which had been converted to run on propane, far cheaper back then, and got to work. Most other trucks would not have made a profit doing this route. After several months on the job, I was called into the office by the CEO of distribution company, who was mad that I'd been getting paid more for my kilometers in comparison to other in-city routes. The manager backed me up and said he'd okayed the rate to balance out the longer hours with fewer bundles. The CEO yelled at the manager in front of the whole office and asked if there was a signed contract to state the agreed terms. When the manager admitted it was a verbal contract, the CEO said it then didn't count and was void. I get organized. Stuck with having to pay off the cargo van, and I really did enjoy the job itself. I kept at it, but documented everything, including all negotiations, calls asking me to come early, requests to set the order of my route, times waiting at the press, times entering/leaving loading bay, who was before and after me, route completion times, return home times, fuel costs, kilometers driven, and press breakdowns. 6 months later, I wanted to take some time off, but was refused. None of the company's spares would agree to do my route since it cost them too much in time and fuel. Working 7 nights a week gets draining. I threatened to quit, and the company relented, agreeing to pay the spares more, but not me. This situation made me madder than ever, and I start reading. I get organizing. I learned of the magical difference between a dependent and an independent contractor and how a dependent contractor is granted many of the same rights as employees, like overtime and holiday pay. I knew this was a temporary job for me, but I was PO'd enough to devote a large amount of my time to make the owner pay. I filed a comprehensive personal employment standards complaint using all those records I'd been keeping, plus I offered my records to around 10 other drivers who followed my lead into filing their own complaints. A key part of my records was proving how much control the company had on how we performed our jobs. Talk of unionizing was always in the background, but it was at this point I joined the cause with a fervor. We attracted one of the country's largest unions who devoted a fair amount of resources to backing us even before they were voted in. My records went to the union, who referred to them consistently. Because I had years of spare experience, I also had in-depth knowledge of many of the other routes and the lopsided pay. I helped convince several of the other drivers to join up, including some of the spares. Forming a union is a long process, so be aware there were multiple votes interspersed with the events below, with each vote favoring the union position. There were also several other enthusiastic organizers who were tired of how things were. The company fights back. The company played hardball and went after us on multiple fronts. A number of union-friendly spares were fired, drivers lost their routes due to strategic amalgamations, and I was let go under the excuse that I had less seniority than the CEO's son-in-law, who had worked as a spare a couple of times over the last few years. My own departure didn't last long. The newspaper itself demanded I be put back on my route following major problems and delays from the son-in-law doing it, bad drops, loads of complaints by carriers and customers. The union filed complaints to the labor board, calling it obvious union busting. I filed a complaint to the Employment Standards Tribunal, which had been set up for my personal case. Since the company had played the seniority card, it was determined I had greater seniority than a number of company men, given I'd worked as a spare since I was 16. The labor board said I should be given the opportunity to bump any of those with less seniority and take their route. Both the company and union asked me not to pursue this if I agreed to an immediate increase to my current route and to be paid for all days missed. I agreed. Negotiations pay off. Now, 2 years later from the start of my story, negotiations were still ongoing, but several interim agreements had been reached. A universal pay algorithm was agreed on, with drivers receiving back pay to when the negotiation started. I received one of the biggest checks. One thing I did not agree to was to let the union negotiate away my employment standards complaint. I was the lone holdout here, so as such I had equal standing in some labor board tribunals with CEO and union negotiators. I will always relish the disdain the CEO had for me at those meetings, to the point of placing his briefcase on the negotiating table to block my view of him, and me reclining back ever so slowly in those nice comfy chairs to grin at him while offering water. The Employment Standards Tribunal determined I was a dependent contractor. They awarded me everything I'd asked for and more, including penalties and interest. They made a point to mention how egregiously the company had behaved after the complaint had first been submitted. The dependent contractor determination greatly strengthened the union's position for future negotiations. I move on to my career and stake. I quit shortly afterward since I'd finished with college and was full into the tech world. It did take a couple more years for the company to finally agree to pay the full amount awarded. The CEO delayed it as long as he could. Every few months, I refused lowball settlement offers. That final check with his personal signature paid off my student loans and a steak dinner. And our last story. Constantly harass me over minor things? Let's see what the boss thinks about you bashing customers over social media constantly. I work at a grocery store. I do my job and I do it well. I'm known as the person everyone can count on. I'm well liked and respected. My coworker has worked there longer than me. She went to college and considers herself better and smarter than everyone else. She constantly acts like she is the boss of the place and is always telling me what to do and making up rules that aren't needed. If anyone makes any kind of mistake, she makes a huge deal about it. She has to go around and tell every single person. If someone messes up something in production, she brings it around and shows it to everyone. She also constantly complains about the way people do things, even things that aren't relevant to her job at all. For example, at night, the closers have to go and get packaging that we use to package what we make. I tend to wait until something is actually getting low and grab a whole box of the item from the supplies area in the back of the store, rather than grabbing a tiny bit of everything every night, because I think it wastes time. To most people, it doesn't matter what way you do it, because either way it gets done. Not this girl. She constantly complains about me doing it this way and says that I never fill the packaging and I don't do anything but sit around when I close. She constantly goes to the managers about this issue and they ignore her because it doesn't matter. So she complains loudly and often about how our managers are idiots who don't know how to run anything. She does crap like this constantly. I used to just ignore her, but I finally snapped. I came in the other day and she'd gone around telling everyone and all the managers that I hadn't pulled the icing out of the fridge the night before so it would be soft for decorating cakes in the morning. She gave me a lecture when I walked in and I informed her that yes, I did. I pulled several buckets. She then responded, "Oops, I thought you didn't. I didn't know the date yesterday." So we had plenty of icing for the day, but she was going to yell at me anyway because in her eyes, I should have pulled more anyways. She had also already gone around telling all the managers and my coworkers that I didn't do it and didn't bother to apologize or correct herself to anyone, making me look bad. I was done. This happened so damn often. So done. I proceeded to go on Facebook and print out every instance of her insulting a customer on Facebook for the last few months. This was easy because she never shuts up and posts long, angry tirades often. When I was done, I had 10 different posts that were at least a paragraph long. Her page is completely public, so anyone can see these. In the post, she called customers various things. Disgusting pigs because she was eating lunch and she could hear someone chewing next to her that she wished she could slap the F out of them. Idiots had terrible taste, mocked a black customer's name along with a picture of her cake, calling a customer a crazy bee, and called our shoppers lazy fat butts because there was a loose shopping cart in the parking lot. So I gave it to my manager, who's taking it straight to HR today. Our company takes this kind of thing extremely seriously since we are all about customer service. That was truly lovely. Often I feel others don't have to go quite as far as they do, but this woman, she dug her own grave. Just tipped her into it. Beautiful. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.